Thank you. I am so excited about this panel because I can't wait. Of course, we had a bit of preparation. I already heard what they would like to say, and I don't want to slow that down because I think they have lots of great ideas. This panel is about moving from ideas to action. There was a good quote from Benjamin Franklin, well done is better than well said. I think this morning we've heard a lot of wonderful discussion about why we do trials, how do we increase equity, what are some of the groups we need to think about, and how do we serve the underserved to get access to trials. We'll also hear about what actions we could take. For example, the REACH BC in recruiting folks. We've heard about CRAFT, a way of taking action to recruit patients, and throughout the discussion. And of course, Jane talked about the whole area of decentralized trial. How do we synthesize that into action? And it's not just individual actions that we adopt from the learning. Of course, love to know that too. But how do we as a province take advantage of it? How do we in BC work across Canada to move that clinical trial liberation into action? So we have 5 panelists here. I think you've met all of them before. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing, but I do recommend that you refer back to the biography on your table so that you have a chance to get to know them. I primarily will be asking 2 questions, and then I'm going to ask our panelists. We'll start with Alison, and then we'll go to Gavin and Munaza and go from there. And we're going to maybe cycle those 2 questions. When you have questions, please feel free after those 2 questions and start putting up your hands. I know Alison's also monitoring online, so our online audience will really welcome your thoughts and questions. How do we move from ideas to action? Alison, maybe I'll start with you. Knowing that we have some key opportunities and issues in British Columbia in doing clinical trials, what are some of the things that we need to support for our strength? And what are some of the issues that you feel we need to overcome for us to really broaden up our trials in British Columbia? Alison, maybe I'll start with you.
Thank you, Kendall. I think listening today to some of the great work that is happening in BC already, there's a lot of innovative new practices. We heard about the CRAFT initiative, and we heard about REACH BC. So many things great work is happening across our entire province, but sometimes it's not connected, or sometimes we're not aware of what's happening, and we're not sharing and talking to each other to learn from each other the way that we could. And we are becoming more connected all the time, but I really think the opportunity there to address any challenges is in community and building stronger collaborative networks and coordinating and working together. So linking some of those initiatives. There was talk about piloting or early adopting and then sharing those successes and spreading that more. So I think that our opportunities for success are going to be in doing that. And we also heard about change champions, and we hear that a lot in change initiatives. But, and I can't recall, maybe it was Nathan, but I was thinking about, yes, we need the champions, but wouldn't it be great if we also had change coaches, people that can actually support you and coach you through that change that have been there, and someone you can go to when you're having those challenges in adopting and innovating new practices in your clinical trial at your sites and institutions. So I think that would be actually a great way to think about it.
Excellent. Thank you, Alison. Gavin, let me turn our attention to you. What do you think? What are strengths, issues in British Columbia? How do we build ourselves up?
Well, excuse me, Kendall. I think, and we've heard today already, that BC's uniquely positioned to do things that I don't think can be done elsewhere. But I will say that I think other places have actually started to innovate and put new models in place that we should be doing, and it is time to act on. In terms of the models, there's others that know a lot more about this than I do, but the UK has used a model of portfolio hospitals, and their portfolio hospitals, to my less than brilliant mind, are very similar to the decentralized model that we're talking about. And this is something they invoked with COVID. And I think many of us would say they probably had a record of success in their trials that nowhere else did. And a lot of that was related to the fact it was not based upon the major metropolitan centers to recruit into all of the trials that they had. They used their portfolio hospitals, as they call that. It's interesting. I think other places in Canada have started to model this. I've loved listening to the conversation today about decentralized clinical trials. I personally, with all respect, wouldn't get too hung up on the terminology, but it's the fact that our trial system cannot be based on tall buildings. It does have to be based, and I've always said that we have to engage the population that's going to benefit from the trials that we're conducting. So that's going to be in different places. And so I think the models that we're looking at in BC, I recently had the opportunity to work with PJ Devereaux and his accelerating clinical trials model. And he had a meeting in the East, and I was delighted to see that BC was very well represented. Cranbrook has a real energy and enthusiasm around their trials model. College of the Rockies is offering a lot of new courses related to clinical research and clinical trials. We really need to help nurture and grow that, and I think we are. But I think there's fertile ground there for the decentralized model. The second piece I would say is people, and I think one of the other elements that various jurisdictions have seen as a critical success factor is to have that clinical research talent locally. And I think BC Grim, with Alison's leadership, and Rob McMaster and others started this. I think Health Research BC is well poised to do that now, to nurture the expertise in local communities to be the leaders of these trials, not just somebody driving in or flying in or on a video or whatever else. And it's not just the patients and partners and others, but the intellectual leadership we need to nurture in the communities that we're trying to engage with the decentralized model. So I'm very keen to see our embrace of new models. I'm very keen to see how we can nurture that capacity intellectually and functionally in the communities that we all serve.
Excellent. Thank you, Gavin. Appreciate that. Munaza, your perspective.
So I wanted to echo a few of Alison's comments. I feel like listening to everybody today, BC's been doing amazing work, and from someone who's not from here, I see there's a lot of opportunity to leverage all of that experience and all of those talent that is here. And I really like your idea about change coaches as well. So these are, people that we can rely on to help us go through those transformations. In terms of, key issues, just approaching this from a diversity and inclusion lens, I feel like we need to be really deliberate in our efforts, and we need to devise some engagement strategies, education and awareness campaigns with underserved populations, such as the one that I spoke about, the community consultation through the Café Scientifique project, and increasing partnerships and collaborations between local healthcare providers and community leaders to help establish that trust. Language accessibility, as I know Jennifer spoke about, some of the work that she's doing in that area, she and her team are doing. So going back to the idea of change coaches, I mean, these are individuals, that we can all kind of work together to leverage our expertise and our experiences in these different areas to help promote diversity in clinical trial participation.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Berni, your thoughts?
It's hard to go forth. I agree with everything that's been said. Ditto.
Nice.
No. So I think one of the things I would look at is COVID was, horrible as it was a perfect storm to push us towards a lot of the things we're doing now with decentralized clinical trials. And I'll take that as the glass half full bit of COVID, I guess. We can't stop here. I think another crisis is coming. It's not necessarily going to be a pandemic, but it might be something to do with climate change or something to do with we don't have the healthcare resources anymore in the big cities to do all the research we want to do or something. And this is our opportunity now to decentralize as a, like a network that needs to be distributed to be safe kind of thing. And that's part of what I think we need to be looking at. So technology is your friend. When I first came to BC, we started with a CTMS, because everything was still paper and it wasn't that long ago. And it wasn't quite the right fit. We moved to real time, actually. Thank you. But there are still many things that, again, we're not doing, like our tumor measurement logs for measuring all the lesions on oncology trials are still on paper, and the paper moves from one place to another, and the paper gets lost, or the paper, so I was embarrassed. We have a network across North America of academic cancer institutes where we have a listserv where we can post questions and we help each other get quick answers. And that's one of the take-home messages is have your network of whoever your peers are across the world to lean on and not reinvent wheels. And I'm really embarrassed to say we're still on paper. Does anybody have an e-solution? And I got 3 answers right away, but a lot of other answers that said, we're on paper too. So there's a lot, can't be embarrassed about the fact that we're slow anymore. We just have to get faster and better and adopt. In my little world of cancer, one of the reasons I came back to BC is BC Cancer is truly a provincial cancer authority, and we have that reach and the ability, I think, to build out greatness across the province. We have a mandate for that, and again, these are strengths, and I know in other areas we have them too, and you need to capitalize now because you'll need it down the road.
Excellent. Thank you, Berni. Lisa, your perspective?
So much of what I heard today was really inspiring for me as someone who comes from the patient community. And things that really stood out were how we need to build trust in underserved communities, how we need to reach people in a way that's culturally appropriate. Nothing about us without us. And I think one of the things we're not utilizing here is us as patients. I'm sitting here because one of my husband's doctors said, you guys are great spokescritters. And we did a video for Canadian Family Health with her on cancer-associated thrombosis. And we were glad to do it. Tom was in remission. We were able to do that. We were able to give it out. About 2 weeks after he died, same doctor who's become a friend said, you know a lot, you've learned a lot. Would you like to do something? Can we find something you can do? And in the immediate aftermath, the answer was, let me think about it. But now I'm sitting up here and I'm volunteering and on the board of Myeloma Canada. The other thing that we could be doing here that we're not, I coach a couple of myeloma families in the States because there's a program to do that. So I can help them understand their labs. I can help them with the shared life experience. If you look at your patients in these trials and say, okay, these people are in a place where they might be able to do it. They're the kind of people who could give comfort and have language skills or are from this community. Recruit them, talk to them, see if they would want to do something. Bring them in. Because you don't always need to hire an interpreter. You don't always need to get, I mean, obviously for medical interpreter you do. But for talking with somebody, for sharing experience, work with your patients. We will enjoy it. We will feel useful. We will feel good about, I genuinely feel like my husband's death has meaning because I can do this. Don't leave us out.
Excellent. Thank you. Maybe what we'll do, before I go to the next question, is I want on the floor, many of you are active participants, you are speakers here, and also you have ideas. So I'm going to start actually asking if there's any ideas that you'd like to add to this part, because the next question is what step do we then need to take? I think we have some really wonderful ideas about building connections, building capacities, not only on leaders, nursing in Rockies, and also, unusual, not unusual, but unconventional champions, engaging patients, really orient ourselves to equity and diversity and EDI, and also looking at provincial agencies, such as Canada Agency, with a provincial mandate, and how do we support those organizations advance these types of trials in British Columbia. I think those are excellent ideas. Wondering if on the floor, if you have comments, questions, just to think about.
Somebody...
Oh, yeah. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Please.
A few years ago at a conference, I saw a poster that said, whose responsibility is it to translate research to optimize its value to society? And 65% of researchers believe they don't have the skills, and 98% say they don't have the funding to support translation of research. But when you have change from talk to action, to me, the action goes beyond the local community. That I really hope that there is the desire and the feeling of need to actually interpret some of the discoveries or some of the new methods or something, and actually trying to translate that into language that maybe the public would understand, but translate it into language that government might readily understand to adjust the policies for the province, but also that would be transferable across the country to other provinces rather than keeping it local.
Excellent. Thank you. So patient, policymakers, communities, also from region to national, expand. Thank you very much. Like that. Maybe I'll go online to see online folks. Please join us in asking questions or comments.
I think Berni wanted to say
I was just going to make a comment to that.
I'm sorry.
It's a great comment, and it goes to Lisa's point as well, that, and it's something I've been working on. I haven't figured out how to crack this nut yet, but our patients are also our biggest, one of my biggest teachers, of course, but also our biggest resource in terms of, I feel like, what's his name, Jim McCoy from Star Trek, who says, damn it, I'm a doctor, not a whatever, accountant or public speaker or whatever. And it gets to that. We have resources there. I'm sure I have a patient who is a statistician, and I really need that. Or I have a patient who is a lobbyist or whatever. And we need to almost develop a speakers bureau or something of those resources.
Yeah.
That would be a great thing to have.
Excellent. Thank you. Alison, any online comments so far? Mm-hmm. And I continue to invite on our audience, if you have comments, questions, please put up your hands.
Yeah,
Alison?
there's a couple here. It's choosing which one
Also good.
is the tricky one. I guess this one's kind of interesting. I'm not sure who can respond, so we may have to open it up to anybody that feels like they could respond to this. But whose responsibility is it to, and they use the words, enforce inclusivity in clinical trials? Is that a regulatory response like Health Canada? Is that a responsibility of funding agencies like CHR? So is it a collective responsibility? Would anyone like to respond to that?
Gavin, and then Berni.
Well, I'll just offer a comment on that one, Alison, in as much as I think both society and professionally, we have not yet achieved that point that clinical research equals best care. And I think that mantra needs to be invoked, and we all have a responsibility with that. You're probably smiling at Cindy Triton. We were just chatting about this at lunch, but it's not just the providers. It's both a societal and a professional responsibility that that's research. There's lots of evidence that research is best care, and we haven't accepted or achieved that or imbued our healthcare system of that mantra to date.
Can I ask Gavin why you think that is?
Why
Why we haven't integrated this thinking or we haven't embedded research in care?
Well, I tend to be Pollyanna, not Eeyore, but this is one that, unfortunately, I think it's always viewed research as expensive, and so it's easy to get dismissed. But there are jurisdictions now that I think are doing a very good job of that, and the default position is becoming research of one form or another. And personally, I find that patients are expecting that more and more, but it can't be left only to patients, and it can't be left only to providers.
Yeah.
I think this is a team effort, and we better get behind it.
Excellent, thank you. Berni, I think you have a comment.
I echo that. And I mean, I was going to say, is everyone too easy of an answer? But it's true. Everyone's responsible for it. But one of the other hats I wear is I'm on the Data Safety Monitoring Committee for the Canadian Cancer Trials Group. And it's great to see, as I've been there for years now, and to see the change of conversation when we're evaluating trials as a committee. EDI is always part of the discussion now. It's like, why don't we have Spanish translated consents for the US population on this trial, or things like that. So it's great to see, but we're all responsible for it, and paternalism has to go, and this has to get in there like fastening your seatbelt when you get in a car. I don't know.
Excellent, thank you. John. Sorry, Jean.
I'll take a quick crack at that. There's a new WHO guidance document on best practices that suggests that it's a global responsibility for equity, diversity, inclusion, and respect. So, new document that you can actually comment on. And I have someone here who would like to.
Just back to the question about whose responsibility it is to share the results of trials. And as a researcher, I've always thought it was mine, not only, but starting first with sharing the results with those who participated. And I have typically done that long before the results were ever published. In the early days, we had a party. Nowadays, we have a website, and we give them a password protected so they can access the site that has the data that will eventually be published, I hope. But all of us and every single organization that runs a trial has a responsibility to the people who participated in it and the scientists and other staff that made it happen to make their contribution of value. And I think that we're falling way short in not sharing results. And you can't count on the media today. We need better ways of communicating research results that go beyond, getting a headliner in the National or something. We must do better at that, because otherwise we're spending a lot of money, we're spending a lot of human capital for no benefit.
Thank you. It sounds to me like that's a great question. Thank you very much for asking. And who is to make sure inclusivity? I think, everybody is, but I think there are different levels of levers. There are policy levers that we can engage policymaker. There are researcher levers and clinician levers on local and also communicating with patients. So figuring out those levers and how those levers coordinate also would be a very interesting aspect of how do we move that forward. I think I see a hand around there early on. I may be wrong.
Right.
Is there another hand here? Don't be shy. Love to hear your question. Oh, there's a person there in the middle. Thank you. And Alison, maybe if you can get ready for the next one after this, we'll go back online.
Yeah, it was just a comment on the DEI and who's responsible for it. I'm a regulatory affairs professional, so I deal a lot with regulators, and I can say that in Health Canada, there is a gender bias policy that is mandatory I think it was made mandatory in 2019, and the FDA also requires a certain level of diversity in the populations, chosen for a clinical trial, and you will be asked those questions when you submit for approval. So sometimes when you run your clinical trial in Canada and you want to get the product, or I'm from medical devices, so sorry, not really an expert in drugs, but in medical devices often we'll have people generate clinical data in, say, Canada or Europe, and then want to try to take their technology to the FDA, and the FDA will ask exactly those questions about the diversity of the population, and they're often surprised that they have to basically run extra research for these populations.
Yes. Thank you. Alison?
Well, this keeps coming up, and I don't know, it's a comment. And where's Jane? Yeah, you had on your slide something about health systems as meta sites, right? And you said, well, we don't have time to talk about that right now, but somebody's saying, big push for pragmatic trials, yes, exclamation mark, smiley face. So just wondering if you could clarify what you meant by health systems as meta sites, briefly.
Mike to Jane, thank you.
Well, I do have an expert on meta sites next to me, so I'm going to hand the mic to her next. But I'll use a U.S. example, so forgive me. But think about the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is a massive health network that can act as a meta site because it has physicians literally covering every state and every disease area. So they're deeply investing in how they can use decentralized methods, both in sponsored trials and ISTs. And I think they are also invested in pragmatic trials. So I won't go down the pragmatic trials rabbit hole, but I hear that the regulators are now very interested in closing that gap between clinical care and clinical research by leveraging health networks more and using data that's collected as part of your routine clinical care.
Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Embry from Care Access Research in the US, although I'm Canadian. And I think even some of you have spoken about meta sites, essentially having telemedicine work with an HCP, or having an infusion done, or a blood draw labs. Those are different sites. Those are different meta sites. I think what's interesting is how are regulatory agencies going to have us document those meta sites? Like if you're writing it on a 1572 or QIU, do you write every location that you're drawing a sample from, that you're doing an infusion at? I think that's going to be interesting.
Yes. It also raised a question in my mind is, in British Columbia, should we start looking at different meta sites, and how do we enable meta sites not only to participate in one trial, but perhaps put some infrastructure there so that they can do more than one trial, and then builds up a whole group of meta sites to work together. It's a system-based collaboration and coordination. That might be another kind of interesting step that we can take in British Columbia, perhaps. Other questions? Back to the floor or panelists. Any reflections to date so far on some of the discussions? All right. There's the question back there. Great, thanks. I apologize. I can hear you. Unfortunately, online, they're going to need the microphone. Thank you. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you. So, Lisa, I'm really glad that you're here today. So thank you very much for coming, because you're very brave, courageous, and to be in front of all these scientists. And so thank you for coming. So my question for you is, how would you encourage someone who hasn't engaged patients in their work before, how would you encourage them to do that work? And what sort of help could you think of yourself as offering, or a patient could offer them? Just a couple of questions in there.
Well, the area I know best is blood cancers. And I know we do have patient groups and coaching groups within Canada. There's a bunch in the area here, there's a bunch in BC. We didn't hear about any of that from our oncologists. We weren't pointed at any patient groups, there was no engagement like that. And I think that keeps the divide open between the physician side and the patient side that we could bring a lot closer. Because like the work that I do in the States with myeloma families, yeah, they could call their doctor or the oncology nurse and say, can you walk me through these labs? What does it mean? But they aren't, because they've got me as a coach mapping that for them. So I think it's an underused resource, but I don't think that most doctors are trained to view patients as peers. And we are. I've got at least as many years of education and training as most of our physicians. And I completely respect what they do. I can't do it. But in this particular bacon and egg breakfast, we're the pig, you're the chicken. So we're deeply invested. We want to be, and some patients do not. And in fairness, some patients want to be told what to do. They want to surrender to somebody they see as able to heal them. And bless, they get to do that. But for the patients who say, wait a minute, I want to be a more active part of my own care. I want to do that. I don't think a lot of our doctors are really open to that. We were very fortunate to work with Jesse Shustek as our oncologist. And he's terrific. And there were a couple of times he rolled his eyes at us and went, right, just keep doing what you're doing. Here's some stuff that's important to me, but I understand you've gone a little bit off script and we're good with it. He was very collaborative, and we appreciated that. Maybe y'all need to meet more collaborative patients. Maybe you need to bake that into the system, that the patients are peers. I have a long-standing practice of honorific parroting. So I'm very, very, very happy to call you Dr. X if you call me Mrs. Elser. It's great. If you want to call me Lisa, I'm going to call you first name. And I find that some doctors completely roll with that, and some of them are like, me. But this is really a long-term cultural shift. It's a mind shift. But I think that it will help engage patients differently. And again, where you have patients who do not want that, who are afraid and who simply want to be coached and talked through, that's a valid choice. I would never ask someone to step into a leadership role in their own care if that put them into a place of discomfort. But you're all smart, you're going to know. You're going to find the ones who go, wait a minute, what about? Reach into that, even if it's uncomfortable. I'm an expert in my own field. I was an expert in the field I retired from. It's a little uncomfortable when somebody pushes back, but it's also wonderful because I learned things. So that's the best advice I can give.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I love that bacon and egg. I would add that the technology would be the hash brown to enable that. Or maybe the ketchup. Sterling.
Thanks. And thanks very much, Lisa. I really do appreciate your perspectives and for sharing those with us. I've been trying to reflect on the question about why researchers or clinician researchers get involved in research. And I think we need to sort of reflect a little bit on that about as to why some researchers choose or are potentially reluctant to have this inclusive, focus on inclusivity in the research that they do. Because some researchers, I think, are dreaming of a New England Journal paper. Other researchers are dreaming of trying to improve the care that they provide for their patients and to promote the health of the population in British Columbia. And I think if you're dreaming of those two things simultaneously, you're probably going to end up not being a very successful researcher. So I think we need to sort of think a little bit more about that question, because the thing that comes to my mind is we did research on knee replacement surgery and why patients systematically seem to be dissatisfied. Something like 15 or 20% of patients routinely indicate poor levels of satisfaction. And one of the things that we began to uncover was South Asian patients were particularly dissatisfied because they were actually unable to kneel after receiving a new knee. And they had every expectation that they would actually be able to kneel without pain after their new knee. So, and we've got the opportunity to actually explore that issue in British Columbia because of the diversity of the population that we have. So if your motivation is to improve the care that's being delivered to patients in BC and have research that actually focuses on that, then I think you embrace inclusivity and diversity by necessity, because that's a requirement for achieving that goal. But if your goal is the New England Journal paper, then actually probably the diversity is going to be a problem rather than a solution.
Wow, good one to reflect on. I really think the discussion that we're now going into is not just thinking about action, but thinking about the why behind it. Clinician researchers, why do we need to be inclusive, and why, the power dynamics between doctors and patients, and why do we need to look at that kind of peer-to-peer? And then from there, again, extract back action to address it. I really like the way that the discussion's going. Alison, I'm going to come back to you, our online friends. Any questions or any thoughts? Too many to choose.
Well, no, there's some great questions here. There really are. I'm just trying to think of one that...
You bet.
There's some that we could talk about for the next hour.
Yes, absolutely.
Spend the next hour on, and other ones I'm just trying to pick. So maybe, I don't know if there's another question in the audience.
Is there another question on the floor for now? We have about 12 minutes left, so we're going to start switching into maybe pushing towards action. Maybe we're not ready, but if you feel that there's an action, for example, if there's a person here, if there's an organization here, if there's a government here, that you're going to say to them, in BC, we got to do more trials, increase inclusivity, we're going to increase patient engagement. What would you say to that person? What would you say to that person? Tomorrow, I'd like to see this happen. What would that be? What would be the action you would choose? I'd love to hear that. In the next we have another 12 minutes or so. Alison, you ready for that comment?
Well, yes, actually, that relates to one online.
Oh,
and then
please.
I think we have some reflections on that. But if I put it as to some action that's needed, it's a question of why we have invested enormous resources in enabling regulatory bodies, and we do for research ethics boards and other parts of the system, but limited or no structures for the knowledge dissemination to patients.
Ooh. Okay.
So if we are identifying an action, is it around that? And why don't we have that structure in place?
Yeah. Structure for regulation ethics, no structure for KT, knowledge translation, or changing knowledge into action. Folks, what do you think? Maybe I'll turn to our panelists first. Comments? Gavin?
Well, I guess I would say I think that and I don't want to make it sound as this is an excuse. I think we are shifting. I think there was a tremendous focus on ethics a decade ago, and probably that was appropriate. I think there is now a tremendous focus on KT and knowledge mobilization, and those of you in the room that are submitting grants, I mean, we all have to fill out that section now. So it is an evolution. It's evolving, and we're not there yet. Personally, I think if we, I tend to be fairly crunchy, and what would that look like? And to Dr. Pryor's comment, I think every research grant that gets funded in the province, how are you going to translate these results to the population that has been accrued? Straightforward question, and you just need to answer that. Number two, to Alison's point, who is the co-PI or the coach, whatever you want to call that, in the communities that you're accruing from? Fairly straightforward question, and that can be answered. And then maybe even number three is, who is the population that you're accruing? And please tell us how you're engaging those persons. I mean, instead of sort of talking about clouds and fog, that's a bad expression today for those that drove in, but if sort of more nebulous issues, I think we need to get crunchy and start to put these down to what can we do?
Thank you. Comments? Oh, yes.
Just something to that point that, within CanSolve CKD, which is one of the SPORE, the strategy for patient-oriented research funded networks, is that's part of what we're doing right now is a lot of knowledge mobilization. But even if we do that, and we have our newsletters, and we have our Twitter, and, we have all the things that are the reasonable things that we have grown to know about disseminating information to our users, how do we go beyond that bubble, right? Patients that are engaged with us already know about us. One of the things we thought about is using those patients as ambassadors, trying to get them to give them the information so that they can also share it within their communities. But that's one of the problems is, if we don't have primary care and other practitioners, some of these people have very complex issues. So they're not just seeing a nephrologist, they're also seeing other physicians along the way. How do we get them to all have some central place where everybody knows that they can go and get reliable information, because we all know how much misinformation is out there. Patients, we need to make sure that we're giving them reliable information that they can trust. But also, how do we get it to those who we're trying to reach, which are those we are currently not reaching? How do we reach those that we are currently not reaching? So just something that we're grappling with, trying to expand the network and to get the word out. But I don't know, if we're only mobilizing it within the people we know, that's not true knowledge mobilization, right?
Yeah, I like that. You trigger a point, maybe would love to ask you or reflect on you and also on the panelists. And that is, when we share, for example, Dr. Pryor said, share the research with the patient, fantastic, right? But how do we share it with the health professionals that deliver those care to the patients? And the patients may say, yeah, I believe in this. But, in education, I was, Gavin is my dean. He'll always be my dean. In medical school, we talk about hidden curriculum. We teach students, oh, yeah, you should do this. But if they go into a clinical environment, it doesn't happen. Much more likely, the student would go into clinical environment and forget what they learned, right? And so how do we engage health professionals also would be an important question as a way of not only translating KT, but actually get it into the core practice, perhaps. Maybe some thoughts on that. And Dr. Pryor, I welcome your thoughts too, because earlier on you were saying, give the result back to the patient, fantastic. How do we disseminate to the health professionals who actually practice it too? I think it'll be an interesting thought. Well, interesting to me. I hope it's interesting to you. What do you guys think? Maybe it's not that interesting. That's okay.
I keep coming back to make those health professionals do clinical trials, because they have to know the best standard of care then, and that's the bar where you have to set it. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I will say, Kendall, that I think having these conversations is part of that transition, because it's not just a medical hidden curriculum, which is rampant, but it's the system that we've allowed to sort of generate sort of, oh, so-and-so's from here, well, or so-and-so's from there. And it's unfair. And I think that's what has been counter to the ethos of EDI and so on that we're trying to invoke. So I think having conversations and putting those issues on the table before persons is probably a start and a good way to do that. It's been something that's frustrated me throughout my career as you listen to what some of the things that are said, but it's still there.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, Jane.
So I was thinking about a practical solution because I like those too. And I think every informed consent says that your doctor should be informed that you're in a clinical trial. I think there's something like that in the consent. And they're never informed. But that would be a beginning way to include the healthcare professional who's not the investigator in the research enterprise, so they would know their patient is in a trial and could potentially ask questions. And we could even push engagement messages to them. But I think that that's where we're trying to head, like engaging the folks who aren't yet ready, but might be very helpful. So have a think about that.
All right, great idea. 2 comments here. There's a comment behind you, Jean. Yeah.
I would like just to comment that the option of the family doctor to be involved in the research is given to patients. It's part of the consent form as an optional checkbox. So if they would like their family doctor to be involved, then all the letters that include the study visits will go to the family doctor. So they would know. So it is part of the consent form, and it's optional. Most of the patients agree, but there are some patients who want it being separate from their regular care, standard of care, and they don't want the information to be shared with the family doctors. But it is part of the consent.
Thank you very much. Great comments.
I don't know if we,
sorry,
okay. Just say a quick,
Berni?
I don't know if our consent forms have that checkbox or not. I don't remember seeing it. And I think I do read our consent forms, but I will say as part of my consenting process, I don't get people to sign consent the day I see them. I present the study, give them the consent form, and my usual boilerplate, part of it is take this home, share it with your family or anybody you want to, and share it with your family doctor if you want to. So at least that discussion hopefully can occur there.
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna use my microphone. There you go.
What are you whispering about?
Here.
So cute. Okay. 2 things. Number 1, British Columbia has a fantastic document that right now is sitting in the website of UBC Faculty of Medicine, the Researchers Care Briefing Note. That was driven by patient partners who sat there every Monday at 4 o'clock during the pandemic with researchers, health authorities, folks from Michael Smith Clinical Trials BC. It was a great initiative. It had all this momentum, and now it's kind of just sitting there. We need to bring it back to life, and one of the actions we can do is go back to our regions, talk to our teams, look at that document, dust it off, and say, what can we do? What actions can we take to start to move this forward and bring it back to life at the regional level, and then again, when we come together in the provincial level, we should do that. The second thing, just the discussions about knowledge translation. It just was an epiphany for me. We work in a health authority. We're trying all the time to shift culture. We're pushing the message, research is care. Gavin, that message, clinical research is best clinical care when patients have access. But we don't translate that information on the results of the trials to the executive directors, to the directors, to the health services leaders where the trials are happening in their areas. They don't know. So we've actually missed that, and that's an action that we should take. I can't believe it took getting to this stage of my career to figure that out, but it came today. Better late than never.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. And Pat, sorry for the feedback. I apologize to our AV folks. Great. Excellent idea. And that document is again called Research is Care.
Yeah.
And it's on the faculty medicine website.
Yeah, COVID-19 clinical research.
Excellent. Thank you. Excellent. Folks, I think we are almost time, correct? Okay. With that, I just want to thank you all. Just an excellent participation. But I really want to thank the panelists. Really start us going. Great stimulation of discussion. Thank you so much. And also thanks for folks online to submit your questions. Thank you.